All right, today is Wednesday, the 16th of March. I'm going to go over chapters 18 and 19. Like the last lecture, it'll probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of a half an hour, approximately, and the rest of the period will be lab. Remember that once you come back from break, the next 3 weeks are lab. So my hope is that the assignments that I'm going to be getting in are of really, really good quality. All right? Some of you, if your second and third one are like your first, then I have no doubt that that's the way it's going to be. All right? Some people put stuff out there. I'm not sure why they put anything out there, because some of the stuff they put out there was just a little bit different. It wasn't exactly what was asked for in the assignment. So I'm on chapter 18, page 495. And before we start, let me just show you this, that if I go out to the jqueryui.com site, on the home page, you'll notice that when you look down the side here, it says interactions, and it's got 5 interactions: draggable, droppable, resizable, selectable, sortable. That's chapter 18. That's what they do, is they go through each one of these 5 options. All right? And that's chapter 18. Chapter 19, by and large, is the stuff here under widgets. All right? So if you do go out to the jqueryui.com, that's where all this stuff is. You also may or may not know, we're going to talk a little bit about the Widget Factory. There is a site called learnjquery.com that actually is put out by jQuery. So a little bit later when we talk about the Widget Factory, they have a little thing on it in here. All right, I guess it's not that little. But what's nice about it is typically they explain something, they give you some source code. You know, you ever heard the old saying, tell them what you're going to tell them, tell them what you told them? It's kind of what they do in here. All right, so they do a really good job of giving you examples, and it's stuff that you might be able to use on your site. All right, so see, we have 4 different objectives: implement drag and drop functionality, make elements and children resizable, how to select multiple page elements using a bounding box. And you may or may not think you know what a bounding box is. You already do. My guess is that sometime, because most of you are in the C# class, that Denny is probably showing you how when you've got a bunch of controls, so if you've got a bunch of controls on a form, you hold down on the mouse button and you just draw that invisible lasso. Has he shown you that? Yeah, I'm seeing some heads shake yes. That's what they're basically talking about in here. All right. Then finally, creating sortable tables, lists, and containers. As mentioned here, a special set of widgets are intended to give you these generalized actions. I just showed you where they are. All right. And with any of these, so if I go over to Draggable, you know, it's pretty obvious what a Draggable is. And then they show you the source code right underneath it for using it. Now, again, it may be that whatever you want to do on the Uber site, it may be that you really can't think of anything that you could use that would be used for Draggable. That's okay. All right? But I'd like you to go through the Draggable stuff that's there, the Droppable stuff that's there, all right? The Resizable stuff that's there, etc. All right? The Selectable stuff that's there, and which also gives you multi-select capability. And finally, the sortable. All right? Because the examples themselves are pretty simplistic. And again, you can use that kind of as a baseline or as a starting point if there's something that you can use on the site. All right? And a couple people have asked me, maybe not in your class, but in the other class, they said, well, for example, in here, I can't think of a lot of really good examples. So, well, then make a new page and put something on there. All right. Well, what should I put on there? No, you're missing the point. This is your frickin' site. It's not mine. So don't say, well, I should make a page. What should it have on it? Stuff. Okay. What stuff? Some of that stuff. Okay. I don't know. All right. It's the same kind of way, Andrew will tell you this back there, that, you know, when students come and ask a question, sometimes I'll sound very naive in the questions I ask. Why? Because it's their program that they're working on. And I don't know what their mindset is when they did this or when they did that. You know, as well, didn't you do it that way? No. but that doesn't mean your way is wrong. All right? So in the same way, just go through the stuff and see if there's anything that's in there that you'd be able to use. All right. So they start talking about the Widget Factory. As I mentioned, you can come out here. There's a thing, too, in the regular documentation. I don't remember where it was, but in the regular documentation out here someplace, I don't remember, like I said, where it was, but somewhere out here in one of these tabs under the jQuery UI, I don't know if it's probably not in the About, no, but somewhere in here. All right, there is some, one of the tabs has got information, and I put this stuff out here. I mentioned this to you the other day. All right, so I found it before. I just don't remember where it is now. And there it is. Okay. Yeah, fine. It was under learnjQuery.com. Okay. But there's a whole thing in there on the Widget Factory. Why use it? How to use it. All right. So what you get in this textbook is about 10 to 20 pages on it. What you get in here is a little bit of text and then an example. A little bit more text and then an example. So I'd strongly recommend you use the built-in documentation here, probably even over and above what you'd be using out of the book. All right. As it says, the Widget Factory defines an interface used by all jQuery widgets. So the different stuff that you're able to do with these widgets, the major things are shown right here. And a lot of them are real simple. Create a widget, destroy a widget, enable or disable a widget. Okay? And with some of this stuff, if you may or may not remember, but the last thing that was on there on your homework assignment for it was chapter 18 or 19, I don't remember, was to try to build a customized widget. All right? And what is that? That's a widget that basically there isn't anything out there that's written like that. You write your own. And sometimes when you customize a widget, what you end up doing is you grab what's already out there and you combine things in different ways to make it do things it wasn't necessarily designed to do. All right? That's the kind of thing that I'm looking for. All right, so they talk about some of the stuff that's in here. Mouse interaction widget. It's automatically applied to all widgets. Typically, you don't need to interact with it much, but there are some exceptions. But again, even when you talk about anything with a mouse, all right, it always depends on the type of app. Again, this Uber app, in many ways, there's a lot of things in here that I'd love to see you put in here that aren't exactly conducive to this Uber app. All right, what do I mean? Well, when I think of using a mouse and worrying about mouse coordinates, I think about things like a game, all right, type of thing, because I need to know locations on a screen. Probably there's not very much, if anything, on this Uber site that you'd have to worry about as far as where something is on the screen. All right. The drag and drop, I've already started to show you that stuff that's in there. Okay. And as it says, drag and drop are designed to work in tandem. You define one element to be draggable and the other one to be droppable. Hopefully that just makes sense. You saw the two boxes in the example. All right, the draggable one was the one that basically you could move around the screen, and the droppable one was the box in which you put it into. And as they mentioned, it defines an element as draggable by holding down on the mouse and moving it. It allows you to position it anywhere on the screen you'd like to position it. The major, options that you have available to you for the draggable widget are shown right here. But again, they're shown in much more depth and breadth of coverage in the URLs that I've already shown you. All right. Here's some events that you can use with Draggable. All right. Now, so, okay, fine. What about them? Well, for example, and I guess I can't click on there, but the drag start. Have you ever seen when you've worked on an application that if some kind of a message box comes up, a modal message box comes up, it might be white, for example, but the background, the screen, the regular screen might turn gray, type of an idea. Have you ever seen that? All right, meaning that that's got the focus now. Once you do whatever it is you have to do and you click OK or yes or whatever, boom, it goes away and the other thing's not gray. You could do that if you wanted to with Draggable and Droppable. You could set it up so that while somebody was dragging, they weren't, basically, they're not really allowed to do anything else anyway, because if you start doing something else, you're probably going to let go of the mouse and you won't be dragging anymore. But there are things to signify the start of a drag, the stop of a drag. You could do something if you wanted to. You could show position on the screen. You may or may not remember this, but way back in Chapter 1, in fact, we talked about this last semester, those of you who were in the JavaScript class with me, but way back in Chapter 1, there was an example program in here that it had a little button that was on it, and you were supposed to try to, the button said, click me. You were supposed to take your mouse and try to put it on there. All right, but the thing is, as soon as you got close to it, a random mouse event happened and it moved it someplace else on the screen. Well, in the same way, when you do that, if you wanted to, you could even show the mouse coordinates. All right, again, not maybe something you'd use on the Uber site, but it's the kind of thing that I want you to start thinking about using. All right? All right. So in the example that's in here, they add draggable images on the screen, and as it's shown, it allows you to drag them left, right, whatever you want to do with them. And again, you've already heard this. Dragging and dropping works in tandem with one another. All right? So as it says, the droppable widget defines an element as a valid drop container used by draggable items. All right? And they talk about some of the common types of options here. And again, some of the major events that happen. And you'll notice they're similar in many ways to the draggable things. All right. You may or may not have looked at this one, but the idea is you could take any of these pictures, the images here, and drag them over to here. They're thumbnails. If you drag them from here to here, they become bigger in size. If you drag them from here to here, it shows you the path to the particular image. Again, is that something you'd use on a website? Well, if it was a demonstrative type of website where you're trying to teach people how to use something, yes. All right. But for what you're doing with Uber, maybe not. I don't know. But it is one way if you wanted to, forgetting this one even exists. I mean, one way that you could set up a page with a slideshow, for example. All right. If you want to put it on its own page, you could have a bunch of thumbnails here, and when you took any one and dragged it over there, you could make it take up most of the screen. Okay? All right. Next is the resizable. And again, as it says, the frequent request for users is the ability to resize just about anything. All right? As it says, you can easily resize an image with mouse controls, and it's not just the image. You can resize anything with a mouse control. You already saw that, or hopefully you saw it when we looked at that. That when you click over here, you get the little thing on the edge, and when it goes into a kind of a downward pointing on an angle, then you can take it and you can move it in any direction you want. All right, make it as big or as small as you want it to be. All right, some of the stuff that's in here, again, if you start to do things like this, it kind of underscores the importance of the fact that you want to do things like test your site on multiple browsers and on multiple versions of browsers, because sometimes things look really cool on one browser and they don't on another. All right, again, especially older versions of IE, a lot of this stuff just is not going to look right on there. So again, there's some of the options, and here are some of the methods, okay? And they've got another example in here where they allow you to come in here and resize images. And notice it says drag bottom to elongate, drag over and left. Well, the one thing that you've got to worry about if you're going to do something like that and allow somebody to do it, and the reason they talk about things like aspect ratios in here, you probably have seen this before. If you've got an image, for example, that let's say it's 600 by 600, and you put it on a page, and you manually just go in and you set the height and you set the width to 200 by 200. It'll scale it, right? When I say it'll scale it, it'll make it 200 by 200. It might look terrible. All right? So you would have to use things like an aspect ratio to make sure that as you're making something bigger or smaller, whatever, that it keeps the proportions, all right, in tow. Selectable, same kind of thing, all right? And that can be an important type of thing. Again, when you've got something that you want to allow somebody to select one thing or to select many things, all right? Again, I just keep going back to these. Really simple example, all right? So I can go and I can select them basically like this, hold down on Shift, all right? But if I hold down on Control, they don't have to be in order, all right? There's all sorts of ways that you can set this thing up. All right. The biggest things that are in here, and one thing that you're going to hear, maybe not so much this semester, but you'll hear it next semester. If you notice, this is a good example here. Selectable, selected, selectable, selecting. When you see something with an ing on it, it means it hasn't happened yet. All right. If you see something with an ed on the end, it's already happened. Why does that matter? Well, think about different events that take place. You know, if you've got somebody, for example, who's trying to move off of a form field, all right, if they've already moved, all right, you can't use the selecting. But if they haven't moved yet, you can use the selecting. And that is one way, maybe not the best way, but it is a way, depending on the language that you're using, that you can force someone to stay in a field until they put the kind of value in which you want them to put in. And the last one that's discussed in here are sorting, elements with a sortable widget, same kind of thing, all right? With the example that they put in here, they're just allowing you to take these and position them anywhere you want to, all right? So, for example, we talked before, maybe what you want is again, we've got a list of thumbnails here, and over here, so when you click a thumbnail, it takes up the rest of the screen here. You could make that list sortable, for example, so the user could put them in any order they wanted to put them in. All right, just as some examples of things that you could consider doing on your own site. that is it for chapter 18. So let's jump right into chapter 19. And again, as previously mentioned, what chapter 19 is it's most of the stuff that's in here. A lot of the stuff that's in here you may already have done. You may already know how to do. Most people understand accordions. We talked about these last time. And I mentioned an accordion is a great place to put a frequently asked questions page. So that's something you could add for an accordion. All right. The autocomplete, I mentioned this the other day. What they put in here is they have a list of programming languages. So if I put in P, for example, notice it shows me any programming language that's in here that has a P in it. And you can use regular expression patterns. So if what I wanted was just things that started with P, I could put that in there too, in which case I'd get Perl, PHP, and Python. But the way it is, it's any place in here. So you could use that. All right. The button thing, you may or may not want to use that. It's basically, as it says, enhances different buttons. They haven't really put any styles on any of these. Okay. The date picker we'd already looked at. You know, when you click on here, boom. All right. So I choose a date and boom, it chooses it for me. The dialogue, just a basic dialogue that you'd want to pop up. All right. This is one way that you can, for lack of better words, kind of simulate a pop-up menu. All right, if you want to put that into a site. The menu itself, ideally, you're going to have a professional looking menu. But this is one way of doing it. And hopefully everyone realizes that when you start going through this and you start talking about menus and whatever, all right, there are multiple ways of doing it. You can set up a menu almost solely using jQuery. You can set up a menu almost solely using CSS. And when I say that, you can use CSS without really any jQuery. All right? But if you use jQuery, you will be using some CSS in it. And again, as you know, that's a vertical menu. Typically, you see them horizontally. But again, it's not that important. progress bar, again, notice, well, I think the way that they have this one set up is if you run this one and you keep clicking it, it'll eventually fill the whole thing up. Again, that may or may not, imagine that you had a page that you created in there. And on that page, you were talking about doing some Kickstarter or some funding type of thing. All right? If you haven't heard of Kickstarters, then you probably aren't out perusing the web a lot. There's a lot of people begging for money out there, and that's become a new in vogue way to beg for money. And when I say that, believe it or not, I'm not trying to be mean. If I ever started up my own venture, I'd probably put a Kickstarter out there too. And I've given to some of those. Other ones, no, I don't think so. All right. Select menu. Okay. Okay, as it says, so you see slider, we're all familiar with sliders. Okay. Spinners, same kind of thing. You can always put mins and maxes on here. Typically, you wouldn't want to allow negative numbers. You see that kind of stuff if you just go to print a page. You see a spinner on there. Tabs. Sometimes this is a very convenient way. All right, you might take a page that you have, and maybe you want to have 3 different articles on the page. So you set it up with tabs so the user can go back and forth and do different things. And then finally, tooltips. Okay. So as far as what's in the chapter then, again, adding autocomplete, slider and spinners, how to add a date picker, ways to style log, dialogues and buttons, implementing tooltips, organizing your pages with custom menus and tab panels, and how to apply status bars to the workflow. All right, so the chapter talks about those built-in widgets that I've just shown you. And they show you some examples. Here's the slider. You can see the minimum and the maximum that they've got set up. Now, when you're working with this kind of thing, all right, when you're working with it, you have to, if you want to do something special when the slider is on a certain value, that'll involve programming. All right. One of the things I did with the class this semester in both the iPhone class and the Android class, they went back and did a program you've done before and they've done before. All right. First, I had them come in here and put in height with a text box, then put in a weight with a text box. All right, then had a button here that said calculate, and then out over here came your BMI and all the other goodies. All right, then I said I want you to go back and height, I want you to change that into a slider. All right, just so they could get used to using that. All right, you could do the same thing with weight. The problem is, with height it's not that hard because we gave something like you guys had 12 to 90, but weight, it's very hard when you've got a slider that's about that big to have 777 values. Some people still did it, all right, and you can, but it's much harder to maneuver your way around when you've got that many values. The accordion, as I mentioned, the example they give here, there's nothing wrong with it. It's another way that you could use it. So what are they doing? They're basically setting up an accordion, and behind each accordion, all right, behind each accordion is an image. Here's another example. If you wanted to, all right, you could set up an accordion like this, and if it had 5 different branches in here there's 4, but if there were 5, all right, you could have a picture of each campus in there. Now, I don't expect you to go out to Milton and out to Monroe and take pictures, but you can probably either find them online or just use something else. But one thing about that is if you're going to do that, and again, there's enough sites out there, some of you have mentioned them, I would expect that if you're going to do something like this, I wouldn't want, for example, the picture of the fort to be this size and the picture of the sunset to be a third of that size. And then the next one, this should look professional. All right, so you find a way, either you find things that are the same size, or you resize them, or you do whatever. The autocomplete, I already gave you an example of how you could use that, all right, in that if you remove those radio buttons and you put over here, right there, if you put location and you set up and autocomplete. And if they put in M, well, what do we have? You know, Milton, Monroe. All right. If you put main campus, you could have that one in there, type of thing. All right. I mean, some of the examples that they show in here are just kind of weird. I don't know how you'd really use those, but when you're working with a date picker, again, notice, and I mentioned this the other day, there's a lot of customization you can do in here. And again, if you wanted to be able to schedule an Uber appointment, you could use a date picker to do that. That wouldn't be very hard to do. That wouldn't be very hard to implement into your site. Again, the customized dialogue, I don't know if there'd be a place for that or not. You know, but as an example, one thing that you could do, well, I think I told you already what I'm having the second year students do with this project is what they had to do was to take every single field that they had in their form, regardless of which, if the form was completed successfully, they had to take every field and they had to bring up a PHP page and they had to basically write a form letter where they grabbed all that information and they said, Dear Roger, okay, and thank you for signing up, and it'd have the information about it, etc. You could do that, or you could even do it on here if you wanted to create your own custom dialogue. When they clicked it, you could say, we have just added the following information to our database. Okay, if you wanted to do that as an example. Progress bars, we already mentioned. I don't know if that would really be appropriate here or not. Okay, if you're going to use a slider bar, this is actually kind of a standard example of using one. You may have seen this before. All right, and they did a good job of actually coloring these to show you that's the amount of red, the amount of green, and the amount of blue. All right, and they're showing you the associated RGB values and what the color would be. Again, that might not be something you would necessarily want to put in, okay? But there are different things that you can use this for. Spinner we've already talked about. Tooltips, hopefully those are pretty self-explanatory. The big thing with tooltips, you know, it's the same kind of thing. Maybe I've told you about this before. You know, I've never ceased to be amazed by things people put on assignments. You know, I had told a class one year, people were not commenting at all, and I was getting really miffed. All right, and I said, start putting comments in, even for things that might not be that important. So I had one student, and he didn't mean anything by it, but he put in a comment on a blank line that said, this is a blank line, you know. And at the time, you know, I used to just run off a hard copy and then circle things. I circled it and said, no, it's not. All right, so I mean, it's really easy to overdo things. Same thing with tooltips. All right. Now, one of the things they said there was, this isn't a good example, but imagine right here, they asked for your email address, okay? Then not a bad thing for a tooltip, and maybe you've seen this before. You put your mouse over it and it would come back and say, this is used internally only. You will not be spammed. All right, maybe you've seen things like that before. All right. And the last thing that's in here, again, are on creating custom widgets. And down here, somewhere it was in here, I don't remember where it is. Maybe it's in the Widget Factory, I don't know. Yeah, there's a custom widget. Again, the example is silly. All right, but the more stuff that you can put in here, the better off you are, and the better off you'll be, okay, in the long run. Because it'll be you guys that are sitting here like Andrew is, but it'll be you guys sitting here a year from now when you're hearing, well, in a couple months, you're going to have to give your final project for the design and implementation project class. You should show things that you built over the 2 years. And I have people here from business and industry. You're selling yourself, all right? For lack of better words, I'm pimping you out, all right? Because I want you all to get jobs. I have had people who have gotten interviews based on things that people have seen here, all right? And that's not a testament to me, that's a testament to you, all right? So if you want to read that as it says there, you start with kind of a semi-clean slate, and you add whatever it is you want to add to it. All right, and they do give you an example here. All right, if you think that's too hard or there's really nothing that you can use, it's not a problem, then don't. But what I don't want is I don't want somebody to say, well, I didn't use any of these because I didn't think any of them were appropriate. All right, well, then you really didn't do any of the assignment. So again, speaking of which, and you've seen this before, but I'm showing it to you one last time here. All right, at a minimum from Chapter 16, go out to the jQuery UI, go out to the theme roller portion of that, take a look at one of the built-in themes. All right, and then go over on the side where you can customize it, change some colors, or do change something. Okay. For Chapter 17, we've started to look at some of those effects that are in there, and as it says, Table 17.1. That was the thing we went over the other day. You may or may not remember, where I showed you like puff and explode and all that other, all those other things that were in there. What we went over today for Chapter 18, as if you can think of something good for draggable and droppable, great. Resizable, great. Selectable, great. Sortable, it might be you can only think of things for one or two of them. That's okay. But again, since you're getting a lot of time to work on this, all right, it's the way that I have to grade this is based on the quality of what you give me. I don't know any other way to do it. All right. And then finally from Chapter 19, these were all the things that we just quickly went over. I'm not going to read them to you. You can see them. And as I mentioned to you, I tried to take everything that's in here that you might need, and I hyperlinked it back to the jQuery UI pages. All right. So after break, first Monday, Wednesday back, which is the week of the 28th, the second Monday, Wednesday back, which is the week of the 4th, the third Monday, Wednesday back, which is the week of the 11th, will all be labs. All right. Then what we're going to do, as it says, we will finish the book. All right. So starting on April 18th, we're going to kind of change directions and talk about Angular JS. Lastly, and you can see it on here, if you've turned in nothing so far, I don't think there's anyone in this room that's in that situation. But as of last week, there were still about 4 people who hadn't turned in the first assignment yet. All right. And I'm not going to lie to you. I did midterm grades this morning. I just gave everybody an S for everything. Why? Because I can do midterm grades really fast when I do that. All right. And I don't want to have to go through all the trouble. I know who's struggling and who's not struggling. You know if you're struggling. And I've got these cards up here. You've seen these before, but she's been in here before. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't seen her. But we do have an outreach specialist, Carissa Johnson. And if you're having any problems with anything, you don't have to let me know even. Just go up to room 2503 and see if you ask if you can make an appointment with Carissa. She'll be glad to talk to you. She's really easy to talk to. All right. She's very pregnant, so I'm not sure how long she's going to be here. All right. I don't remember when she said her baby was due. Okay. And the funny thing is she's also teaching. So Thursdays, she's across the hall teaching. She's got some kind of a sociology class or something. All right. Any questions? And you see when this is due. All right. So you got plenty of time to work on it. I hope everybody has a good vacation. And if you don't do anything during the vacation, that's probably best for you. Again, last thing I'll ask is if you haven't done so already, please take the time to fill out course evaluations for the first 8 or 9 weeks, whatever we're in. All right. Because my boss, I always give those to her. All right. So I look at them first, then I give them to her. All right. Because one of the students, second-year students yesterday, Mike, asked me, he said, does your boss look at this? And I said, well, she sees them after I do. Why? And he showed me his. I don't, typical, don't you have to show it to me? He goes, no, it's okay. So on the back, he wrote, great job, you deserve a big raise. And I said, yeah, right. She'll read that and laugh. Okay? Because we've been told already, not only are we not getting a raise, we're being asked to give up a week's pay. You ever hear of furloughs? We're being asked to take a furlough this year. Okay? Which somebody who's at the top of the scale, they're asking you to give back approximately $2,000. Which may not sound like a big thing, but when you are a single income household, it's a pretty damn big thing. That's like they're asking for like $160 a month back. And what are we getting? Well, they want to make a new committee that will improve employee morale in ways that are non-monetary. Okay? Because I was already asked, would you want to be on the committee? No, but I've got a way to improve morale. And they said, what's that? I said, don't have committees about improving morale. Okay, it wasn't met with a lot of acceptance. So, all right, that's all I've got.